All right, welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of the very cleverly named Watching Movies with April and Kenny. I'm Kenny.
I'm April.
Tell the people how we know each other.
Total strangers. Met at the grocery store. Now, Kenny is my brother. I am Kenny's sister. That's how we know each other. From birth.
Yes, from life. I mean, when you get down to it, I guess at the end of the day, we are strangers in a way.
All right. Let's not do that.
All right, we'll save that for a later episode. A more existential movie, I guess.
Yeah.
So, we are here to surprise talk about movies. It is an interesting topic for us. April, what's your relationship with movies?
I watch them. I guess generally don't like them according to everyone else. I guess I'm more critical than I think. I have a standing series on my Instagram where I live watch and talk about movies. So that's where my credentials come from.
Yeah, definitely. I think in our family, I embrace and am known for my reputation of hating virtually every movie that
Most
I watch.
Movies, yeah.
Yes. Most movies are bad, and the people who make them are evil in my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that caused this podcast to come into existence was a group discussion we were having, and your partner was in on it as well. And it was my first time meeting your partner. Uh-huh. And he says, yeah, we're talking about movies, I'm talking about my critical lens, and I think maybe Samantha, our sister, called you critical, and you're like, I'm not critical, and then your partner literally laughed out loud.
Just laughed.
So yeah, we're in the same boat. You and I, we dislike a lot of things. Although I think you're generally happier watching something bad than I am.
Oh yeah, definitely. I guess that's why I don't consider myself to be like critical of movies. I've also always just been like if I go see a movie at a movie theater, I'll generally like it. That's not necessarily how it is for you. Like, you might come out of a movie theater and be like,
Almost certainly I will.
Yeah, so I guess that's why I thought it wasn't critical, but apparently, according to everyone else, I am. So, you know what?
I think that's
fine.
I think that's fair, though. I think you are critical, but that doesn't mean you won't go and watch it and have a good time.
Yes.
One of my YouTube movie critic inspirations is Cosmonaut Marcus, and I think he's very similar to you, where he will happily judge the shit out of movies that he watches and criticize them, but he will almost always have a good time watching a movie, no matter what its quality is.
Yeah, totally.
That seems to be your MO.
Yeah, I agree.
And you actually, speaking of your Instagram series, you watched the Fast and Furious series in its entirety?
All 8 movies that were out at the time in a weekend, and it changed me fundamentally, I
think. Are you going to go see F9 in theaters?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Actually, that's going to be fun.
My partner, Vince, is not caught up on the franchise. He said the last one he's seen is number 5, and we just got done watching all the Marvel movies, and I was like, well, what's our next journey going to be? And he's like, well, I need to catch up on Fast and Furious. And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely not. Like, you do that on your own time. I will have no part in that.
That's so funny, because I was fully ready for you to come in and say, yeah, I'll be there. I'm going to be there as well.
No.
Once was enough, huh?
Yep.
Well, we are here today to talk about an actual good movie. One of the best movies, in my opinion.
I agree.
We are talking about Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 version. And maybe at some point in this discussion we can talk about this versus the miniseries on BBC. Mm-hmm. That is dog shit. No, I'm just joking. We can talk about the two later on. So this is Pride and Prejudice. Director is Joe Wright. I looked it up, and this was his first feature film. Really knocked it out of the park.
Wow. Damn.
Don't get your hopes up, though, because basically all his other feature film work, his next one was Atonement. Mm-hmm. which I remember only because when I bought the DVD originally, one of the previews before the movie was Atonement, also starring Keira Knightley in a period romance piece with lots of stolen glances.
She's been in a few of his movies I saw on the IMDb page.
Yeah, clearly there was some kind of working relationship there.
Yeah.
But honestly, other than Atonement, and I have not watched that, I don't know any of his other work. I'm not familiar with it, but he really seems to have pigeonholed himself into one particular genre.
Yeah.
I guess when your first at-bat is just perfection, you really give yourself a dilemma going forward.
Well, and there's a real kind of market for period pieces. There's a certain demographic that just loves that shit, so.
For sure. This stars, as we said, Keira Knightley as Elizabeth Bennet. Stars Matthew Macfayden as Mr. Darcy. Has a few other people that you're going to recognize.
Yeah, I had some honorable mentions there because there's like randomly quite a few well-known people in this. Like Dame Judi Dench is in this. Donald Sutherland, he's been in several other things. He's very, I don't know, when you see him, you're like, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Rosamund Pike. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I love him in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's
fantastic.
Perfect. Yeah. Rosamund Pike, who is in some other things. She was in Gone Girl. And then Carey Mulligan, another kind of well-known name. And then, real quick, I saw this piece of trivia on the IMDb page that the actor who played Charles Bingley, I forget his name already, Simon Woods, I think, the director thought that he was perfect for the role but didn't want to cast him because he and Rosamund Pike had dated previously, had been in a relationship. And so he didn't want to put those two together. Yeah. And so I guess he decided that, like, he just couldn't get past this guy as this role. And so he called Rosamund Pike and was like, is it okay if I cast him as your love interest? And she was like, yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know whether to say that doesn't come across that they're exes or that it's good that they have some kind of chemistry and energy and that really works for them.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, Rosamund Pike, I was thinking about this at the time when I first watched this. In my eyes, she was a no-name. Like, most of the people in this were no-names. It's like, okay, new Keira Knightley, even then. Judi Dench, sure. Mr. Bennet, yeah. I mean, it's like like you said, he's one of those people that you know of. But a lot of no-names, which I think really helps the movie. Okay, so we're already starting to get into conversation. But what we want to do is, part of our intro is we each have written a one-line tagline for the movie, like what our version of the poster for the movie would be. So I'm very curious what yours is.
My tagline was just, looking for early 19th century porn, you found it. This whole movie just kind of feels like sex to me in like the most chaste way possible. Yeah,
I definitely get that. That actually is a good tie-in. Mine has a similar vibe to it. My tagline is Regency-era horniness for a post-pandemic world.
Nice. Yeah.
Because I agree, it's like, it has a ton of sexual tension, but no sex and very little physical contact.
Something I mentioned in like my notes several times was like, this whole movie feels kind of like they're edging the whole time. They're just like there's that tension and they're getting there, but they're just not going to do it. They're not going to kiss. No, they're not.
You compare it to edging. In my mind, when I was writing about this, it's like a really good. Let me explain in detail. But it feels like a really well done horror movie, in that the best horror movies are built on the tension, and you never really see the monster or whatever it is, and it's like it's giving you these moments, but it's like really playing out the ultimate act. And that's this movie too, but from a romance side, where people never really, like, you get close, but you never really get to see the actual romance, the moment of passion happen.
That's true.
And this takes it even further. I mean, in the book, you get nothing. This, at least, they kiss at the end, you know. Oh my god.
Yeah, Yeah, we'll talk about that too. But do you want to hear their actual taglines?
Oh, yes, please. I didn't even think about this.
So it's showing me 3 taglines. This holiday season, experience the greatest love story of all time. The second tagline is just a romance ahead of its time. And then the third one is, sometimes the last person on earth you want to be with is the one person you can't be without.
I like the first one okay. The greatest love story of all time. I mean, it is pretty great.
It's absolutely, yes.
The one person... I mean, that last one is just so on the nose.
Yeah.
I like ours better, for
Definitely,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the movie. So straight off the bat, we get our opening shots of the Bennet's estate. So you have this family in the Regency era in Britain, and there are a lot of establishing shots right off the bat to show their property and this sort of pastoral, beautiful paradise that they live in. Mm-hmm. We immediately see Lizzie, who is reading. Mm-hmm. And the big thing that I always notice at the beginning of this movie is just how quickly and efficiently they are setting up all of the key players and all of the key pieces. You get a ton of information very quickly at the beginning of this film.
I was going to say, you see all of their personalities immediately. Like, Elizabeth walking, reading a book, just kind of hanging out. The younger girls are, giggling and, running around the house. Mary is just sitting playing piano. That's all she does. I don't remember what Jane is doing. And then Mrs. Bennet is nagging at Mr. Bennet, and he's blah, blah, blah. That's very much just what they are the whole movie.
Yep. You get the entire dynamic in the first 10 seconds of the movie with this family. And not only do you get the general view of the family and the characters, you also get the setup, the inciting incident, the setup for the movie in the first 30 seconds of the film, where Mrs. Bennet is, as you say, bothering Mr. Bennet about how Mr. Bingley, this big to-do, is going to show up to town, and how we must get the girls to say hello to Mr. Bingley because we've got a bunch of daughters and no sons, and if we don't get them married off, we're going to lose our house. Mm-hmm.
Which is exactly how the book starts, too. In the first, 3 pages, all of that is set up in the book, I remember.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think is interesting, too, because this is based off of the novel by Jane Austen, her most famous novel by modern standards, I really like the choice that they don't bother us with any, voiceover or narration. This novel has, a really famous opening line. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And I love that they don't bother including it in the movie. That would have been so easy to do. To have because I'm thinking about, it reminds me of Bridgerton. And Bridgerton is built off of, there's this narrator literary figure, which I like, that it works in that context. But it would have been very easy for this movie to go down a similar path. Mm-hmm. And I'm really glad that they don't. They communicate all of that same stuff very quickly and efficiently with the medium of stuff that we can see, which is great.
I agree.
So they set all that up. It's funny that I like that you said I can't remember what Jane is doing, because even though I like Jane as a character, and I like Rosamund Pike. I think she does a great job playing Jane, but she definitely lacks the vibrancy of a lot of the other characters. There's not a lot to her.
She's kind of a nothing character, even though, the first part of the movie is about, getting her a husband and her and Mr. Bingley and getting them together. She's just, a nice girl. And that's it. That's, her whole personality. She's nice.
She's a nice, pretty girl. She does have a little bit more going on in that she thinks too generously of people. She never suspects ill will of people. And that's a little bit of an arc for her as this story goes on. Although I don't know how much of an arc it is. She always suspects the best of people. And at the end of the day, she's kind of right. Darcy is actually a good guy. Bingley is actually a good guy. But Bingley's sister, no, that doesn't work.
Huge bitch.
So they go to the ball, and they go and meet Mr. Bingley and his dour-looking friend, Mr. Darcy, and his sister, who, I don't know who that actress is. I don't know what else she has been in. But she's one of these people who's, like, born to play somebody you hate.
Yep. She did a great job.
Yes. You will... She can issue a withering gaze like nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. And we get... Really here's, like, the setup to the movie reaches its culmination where we get Jane is meeting Mr. Bingley, and they hit it off right away. Oh, this looks great. This is amazing. And Mr. Darcy, Bingley's friend, snubs Elizabeth.
Yep.
How do you like that opening scene? How do you like their initial interactions?
I liked it. My notes basically just said that I thought Elizabeth was very charming. Like, she's witty and she's kind of funny and she kind of throws shit back at him. He was not charming because that's not his personality. Like, he doesn't, like, connect with people and, like, have good conversation, whatever. So, like, it's kind of up to Elizabeth to just, like, be the charmer and then just let shit roll off her back. And she's like, oh yeah, even if your partner's barely tolerable. And then she's just like, okay, bye.
And then this great shot of her, she issues this line to him, and then she turns heel, and the camera dollies back with her as she walks out as the dance is going on, and the doors close behind her, and we get to enjoy this clearly triumphant look on her face.
Yeah.
Like, hell yeah, put him in his place.
That's right.
And so it establishes this relationship between them, and also really makes us like her, because she got snubbed and then also is witty enough to get the last word on this guy. Like, by the end of that ball, we really like Elizabeth.
Yeah. And we think that Darcy is uppity and thinks he's better than other people.
It's very interesting. This is it's one of my favorite movies, and it is one of the most rewatchable movies. Like, this is one of the very few movies that I own, because whenever I move somewhere else, I'll throw it on. Like, in the days before I have internet, it's like, this movie's just on repeat to make me feel comfortable in my new place. And I think part of that is... The reason I bring it up now is that, you're right, we're supposed to not like Darcy at this point, and not know what is going on, and not know that, in fact... he is, like, crushing on her from the get-go. But I can't remember watching this movie without that knowledge.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter, you know? You still get to enjoy those emotions, even though you know what's going on.
The first time I watched this movie, I hadn't read the book yet. So the first time I watched it, I was like, all right, fuck this guy. Like, you know, he thinks he's cooler than everybody else, whatever. And then when I read the book... very quickly you find out that he's, like, into her. Like,
yeah,
just, like, very quickly. There's no part of it where he's like, oh, I don't like her. It's like, oh, her eyes are beautiful, and, like, he's talking about her in his head. So it's a little bit, they don't convey that so much in the movie.
Which is another good move, I think.
Yeah.
I like not knowing. Like, that sort of dramatic tension is really great. But yeah, it's interesting that you got to have that actual experience of, like, this Darcy is a dickhead.
Yeah.
But you're right, in the book, like, right away, you're hearing Darcy's thoughts, and he's like, oh, I've got feelings for her, but I can't. Not so in the movie. In the movie, we don't like Mr. Darcy from the get-go.
For a while.
That gets compounded shortly thereafter. Another great character arrives on the scene, a Mr. Collins. So who is Mr. Collins?
Mr. Collins is a little toad of a man. He's like a cousin or a relative of some sort, and because none of the Bennets are boys, he's going to get the estate and all that when the dad passes. And so he's, like, come to visit them and hopefully find a wife.
And he is a toad of a man. He is a chode of a man.
He is a chode of a man.
I think we were commenting in our commentary track, which will come out, hopefully, after this episode. We had some audio issues. But one of the things I think we discussed is how brave you have to be, how selfless you kind of have to be to take the part of Mr. Collins and
embrace being that person.
The role I was born to play is this awkward and forgettable and clumsy awkward man. Mm-hmm. And my God, does he nail it.
He does. And they do a good job of they give him the weird haircut with the tiny bangs. And so he just looks kind of weird. And he has the awkward mannerisms down really well. But I remember I watched this movie, I think after I had watched Pirates of the Caribbean. And he was like a cool villain type guy in that movie. And then I saw him in this movie and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Is that guy? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I was the same way. I saw this after watching Pirates 2, where he is this cold-blooded admiral guy who's boss and in charge of everything. Very different characters, and he pulls them both off. So it's a credit to him as an actor.
Totally.
So yeah, Mr. Collins. I think... So I typically don't watch a lot of movies based off of books that I like and have read. And it's usually because the best they can do, typically in my eyes, is do as good as the book, in which case I have the book. You don't?
They don't. They never do as well as the book is the thing.
Well, I think the exception is in the case of something like this, where so much in the writing is left up to your imagination. Because I'm thinking of Mr. Collins and his performance. You're told that he's undesirable. But this movie makes you see it and feel it, where you don't get that as much out of the book itself.
Yeah.
And and in the same way, like, the music in this movie is so great. Like, the atmosphere you get that you totally miss out on if you're just reading the book.
True.
So Mr. Collins arrives. He talks to the women, and he's like, immediately is like, oh, man, I wouldn't mind marrying that Jane.
Jane's
she
pretty
is so
hot.
Fine. And Mrs. Bennet's like, oh, she's taken. Because she's expecting a proposal from Mr. Bingley.
She's going to marry a rich guy.
But my daughter, Lizzie, is very pretty, right? Oh, yeah.
He takes that news very well.
Yeah, he says something like an admirable consolation or something like that.
Yeah.
An admirable alternative. And so, yeah, we immediately get the idea that Mr. Collins is, like, not in it for the romance. He's just trying to marry the most available bachelorette that he can. Mm-hmm. And so, after this, we get another arrival of a character. Bang, bang, bang. We're just getting all these important characters. And this is one thing that, on repeat viewings of this movie, that I've come to see is how fast this movie moves. Mm-hmm. You do not get any time to breathe in this movie. And it's not that it feels rushed either. This is something I only really notice on watching it tons of times. But everything just happens one after the other. There's like so much momentum in this movie.
Yeah, no wasted time.
No, it's very efficient. So the next thing that happens is we meet Mr. Wickham. So the girls are out in town saying hello to the officers.
The officers!
And Lizzie meets the colorful Mr. Wickham, who is an officer in the army. He is the budget Orlando Bloom.
Yes, the great value Orlando Bloom.
He's a good-looking guy.
He's definitely.
Perfect. He's perfect for the part. He is, like, good-looking, he is charming, and you totally buy him as the asshole that he turns out to be later on. Mm-hmm. I guess that's easy for a pretty boy to do, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of by default, you can be charming and also look like an asshole.
Yep.
But we don't know that at first. He's just a charming young officer who has a low rank and doesn't have much to his name. But that doesn't matter to Elizabeth because she doesn't care about those things. And she's just taken away by Mr. Wickham. She's very interested in him.
Oh, and compounded by the fact that he doesn't have very nice things to say about Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy did these not so good things to him, and she already thinks of him as like an asshole and uppity, and so she's immediately like, oh, yeah, fuck him.
So this is just feeding into how she views him already. Mm-hmm. There's a great shop in the ribbon shop where they're having their little banter back and forth, which is very fun. And I think Lizzie asks him, like, what will the other officers say about you when you have no idea where it comes to ribbons? And he laughs and kind of walks away. And she, like, looks at his ass. It's very subtle. But this is what we're talking about, where it's like, this is like a movie where sex is all over the place, but very subtly and never out in the open, really.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. And then they leave together. They're walking out in the countryside, and they run into, guess what? Bingley and Darcy out on their horses. And we get a very dramatic stare down between Darcy and Wickham. And Wickham explains, Darcy and I were connected when we were younger. That fell through. His father promised me a heritage before he passed, and Darcy denied it. And as you say, Lizzie's just like, Darcy, that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Hate that guy.
Yeah.
But this leads to a ball at Netherfield, where the Bingleys are. And a very intense in a lot of different ways. Lizzie's hoping to meet Wickham. Darcy's there hoping to talk with Lizzie, though we don't know that. Mr. Collins is there trying to put the moves on Lizzie. And Jane is trying to wrap things up with Bingley. And that's like all the like high level stuff. And then we get a lot of great shots of the rest of the family and what they're doing.
Mrs. Bennet is getting really drunk. Mary's just trying to play the piano.
And doing a really bad job. There's this really like cute and tender thing where the dad is like, let the other girls have a turn. She runs away crying. And then this one shot as the camera's panning around this party, he's comforting her. And she's like, I practiced all week or something along those lines. It's giving us like, again, one of the things I really like is that it's giving you a feel of like this being a real place that you don't get as much if you're just reading the book, which the book is great. I'm not trying to knock the book. I'm saying you get something out of the movie that you don't get from the book. And then I think an absolute, like, this is an iconic scene from the movie is their dance at Netherfield Ball, Darcy and Lizzie. What are your thoughts on that? It's so
good. That's the part where I'm like, it's so sexy and there's so much tension. So much tension that they like take away all the other people dancing and it's just them looking at each other, and you get like the deep like cello in the background and they're just like staring at each other and dancing. I also love, before all that, their little conversation where she's just kind of like ribbing him and he's like trying to keep up, and like he is actively trying to keep a conversation with her because he likes her, and she's just kind of like, oh haha, like you're taciturn and stuff like that. I like that conversation a lot.
It's really good. It's great too because you watch it, and if you hear their conversation and you didn't know Darcy's intentions, you'd be like, oh, he's being a dickhead again. And then it plays out, and when you know what's going through his head, and he's just wrestling with his emotions, and he, like you say, he's not a socially aware or graceful person, and he's just like trying to keep up with this like whip smart girl who's kind of flirting with him. She's just like dueling wits with him. Yeah. And he's not used to this. So the ball ends. We also get Mr. Collins making an ass of himself. Because of course he does. So this goes next day. It seems like Bingley is really taken with Jane. The Bennets take a carriage the next day because they stayed over at the house because they were so wasted. And it's at this point that we get to the low point, the dramatically low point of the film. A lot of things happen in sequence here. So we get Lizzie's dramatic refusal of Colin's proposal. He proposes to her in a hilariously awkward scene. And she's like, I can't accept your proposal. And he, again, shows himself to be an ass. She runs away and runs out of the house, I should say. And her mother goes running after her, saying, you have to accept, drags Mr. Bennet into it. And one thing that the movie does that the book doesn't, or at least it amplifies it, it really amplifies Lizzie's relationship with her dad, with Mr. Bennet. It kind of exists on the sidelines. Mr. Bennet says, of all his daughters, Lizzie is the least silly. I think that's his like praise of her. In this, it really makes Lizzie his favorite, and Lizzie is a total daddy's girl. Yeah. And we get to see really cool moments of that. And whenever Mrs. Bennet says to Mr. Bennet, make Lizzie accept Mr. Collins' proposal, he says, you know, your mother will not see you again unless you accept, and I will not see you again if you do accept. AKA, this guy's a buffoon. Please don't
say
marry
yes.
this guy. Yeah. And she doesn't. So that's one low point. Then we get, immediately after that, literally she runs back to the house from saying no to Mr. Collins, only to see Jane distraught. She just got a letter that Mr. Bingley's leaving the town, going back to London. And then, immediately after that, she's like on the swing being like, man, this sucks. And then her friend Charlotte comes to say, I'm getting married to Mr. Collins.
Yep.
We haven't talked about Charlotte at all. What do you make of her character?
I love Charlotte. She's so great. She's a good friend. She's very pragmatic. Like, there are different parts where she's like, Jane needs to show a little more interest or a little more affection. Like, Mr. Bingley might think that she doesn't actually like him, which is kind of what happens.
Which is correct.
Jane doesn't show, big emotions or anything. And then at the point where she's telling Lizzie that she's, marrying Mr. Collins, she's like, hey, these are the facts. Like, I'm old. I'm living with my parents. I'm just a burden. This is like my one shot to like get out and have my own house and my own life. And so I'm going to take it, which is kind of sad, but very pragmatic.
And it's hard to say that she made the wrong call. I don't think the movie, at least, is not actually telling you that she made the wrong call. Like, obviously, we're supposed to root for Lizzie, who one of her motifs is, I want to marry for love. That old chestnut. And she does eventually. But she also marries a guy who is incredibly rich.
Yeah, she kind of lucks out there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely... That's part of the politics here, right? And the movie doesn't shy away from the fact that there are a lot of politics involved. I mean, that's what is a lot of the drama of Regency novels. Yeah.
The part where Charlotte's like defending herself for agreeing to marry Mr. Collins. That's like that audio is on TikTok now, and it's like a trend. And she's like, I'm 27 years old, and people are like putting their finger down. She's like, I have no prospects and no life, and they put their fingers down. She's like, I'm a burden to my parents, and everybody's like, yep, that's me. Yeah, and I'm frightened. I think that's funny.
Oh man. Yeah, you need to inform me of these trends. I'm an old man and I don't know about these things. That's amazing. I mean, yeah, if I were in Charlotte's shoes, because, okay, so to get through this, one of my points here is that this is the low point, right? Everything seems lost. Lizzie just had to deny this proposal. Jane's engagement put in quotes because they weren't engaged, has fallen through.
She's heartbroken.
Yep. Her best friend in the world is marrying this buffoon and is now going to be out of her life completely. She's on her swing. She's spinning around. And we're at the low point, and literally like 10 seconds later, after a montage of the seasons changing, Lizzie gets a letter from Charlotte saying, come visit me. And she's like, I will happily come visit you. And everything's like, this is nicer, isn't it?
Yeah. They don't really wallow in it. They just, this is the sad stuff that happened, and we're moving forward.
It's a comedy, right? When I was in English classes, we talked about comedies and tragedies, and in the old style of the word comedy, it meant that the story ends in a marriage, whereas a tragedy ends in a death. And of course, you can blur those lines, but this is a comedy, so yes, there's a dramatic low point, but it doesn't matter. Let's get on to the good stuff.
Yeah.
So she goes to visit the Collins, and I love the way that they characterize Charlotte's marriage to Mr. Collins. She gets there and she's like, let's go upstairs to my own personal room. We won't be bothered here. This is a room for my own particular use.
I have all my own space.
Yeah. And she is happy. I think that's a kind of a nice thing. Like, she is very happy with her new life. And one of the cute little things that they do is Mr. Collins calls up to Charlotte and says to come downstairs quickly. And Charlotte, very, invested, says, has the pig got out again? It's like, you get this little snippet into their life, and she's actually into it. Which I think is cool. But they're actually being called to dine with Lady de Bourgh.
Lady Catherine de Bitch.
Played by Judi Dench.
Yes.
Very well done, too. She's another role that is like not very important in the book, but becomes very important in the movie. And it is really good. So they get called to the patron of Mr. Collins, this absolutely ludicrous estate that she has, to have dinner. We get to see their interactions where, as you say, she is quite the B word. And Lizzie is just being herself, and she won't take shit from people.
Yeah, their conversation at the dinner table where Lady Catherine is like, are any of your sisters out in society or whatever? And she's like, yeah, all of them. She's like, all of them? And you're like, you're not married? Your other sister's not married? No. What about your governess or whatever? And she's like, we didn't have one. And she's just very matter of fact, like, hey, I really don't care.
Yeah, and Lady de Burgh says you share your opinions quite confidently for someone so young. And we're like, man, fuck this lady.
Yeah.
This movie's very good at getting you to hate people.
That's true.
And then, all of a sudden, stepping out from the shadows is Darcy. Don't know where he came from. And stepping from the shadows even more gracefully, Colonel Fitzwilliam.
The other Fitzwilliam.
Best character in the entire movie.
He's in there for about 2.5 minutes. Just a really funny addition. Just so that she can say, Fitzwilliam, I need you.
That's such a great addition. There are a couple lines in this movie that stand out in our family in particular for whatever reason. And that's one of them. I think because Matt of the Intangibles fame, our brother, that's like the only line he knew from the movie, I think.
It's always Matt for some reason who makes these lines so funny.
Because he was calling someone from another room in our house, I think. Fitzwilliam, I need you.
Probably. He's the one who did the Pepsi's still here, too, for some reason.
Which is a line from earlier.
Yeah.
They're looking for Wickham at Netherfield Ball. And Charlie goes, Pepsi's through here. And it's such a throwaway nothing line that no one else would care about. But it sticks with us. Yeah. But anyway, Fitzwilliam, what a guy. What a bro. He basically drops the information, the intel, to Lizzie that it was Darcy who separated Jane and Mr. Bingley. He's the one who convinced Mr. Bingley to leave. And it's at this point that you and I probably diverged the most on
Kenny's
our opinions
least favorite part of the movie.
Which is your favorite part of the movie, I think.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite part.
Okay.
I do like it, though.
So she's, like, separated, and she's looking at it. They're in a church sermon, Mr. Collins. It doesn't matter what he's doing, but she's looking at Darcy being like, he separated them, and he dramatically looks up and meets her, and she's like, looks away.
And then she's running away.
Runs out into the rain, the pouring rain, under some, romantic architecture. Don't mind any of this. But then he comes and surprises her and is like, confesses that he loves her, that he wants to marry her, and puts his foot in his big mouth.
Yeah, this so stupid.
Yeah, he's like, despite all the reasons I have not to marry you, I do want to marry you. Yeah,
he's like, your family's poor, your mom sucks, she's really annoying, like, your little sisters are really not great either, blah, blah, blah. But I love you, so marry me. And she's like, what the fuck? No.
And the movie, again, it has taken time to establish that Lizzie is a daddy's girl. And it ends with him saying, even on some cases, your father being inappropriate. And then the thunder literally cracks overhead. And she looks at him like, I could kill you right now. And she's like, no, hell no. He's like, why are you being so rude to me when you could just say no? And she's like,
kind
I
of
know
polite.
that you separated my sister.
Kind of polite in the beginning of it. She's like, this is out of the blue.
I guess that's true.
No, I don't think so. And then he goes into it more, and she's like, excuse me, you ruined my sister's chances of being happy. And then they get more into it.
So the reason I don't like this scene is that all of that's good. I like all of the scene. And then at the end of it, she's like screaming at him, like, you're the last person I could be presumed upon to marry. And they're like in each other's face, and it lingers on them, and they're like leaning in for like maybe a kiss. Why would they be doing that?
I read some trivia about this, too. And
they did kiss. And
no.
They banged.
No. And the trivia doesn't really explain it or make it better, really. It just says that the almost kiss during that proposal scene wasn't necessarily planned. It was like unique to Matthew Macfayden because it just came up in his like screen test with Keira Knightley for like a chemistry read. And that's how it happened. And so that's just how they did it for whatever reason.
They just liked that moment so much that they wanted to do it that way.
I guess they liked the chemistry so much. I don't know.
I mean, I don't mind that the movie is more sexy than the actual like period would be. So, for example, I remember taking an Austen class in college, and we watched this movie as part of it. I'd already seen it. And our professor was pointing out when Jane makes the walk to Netherfield through the mud, and she arrives there, and her hair is down. Like, it's made to make her look like a mess, but at the time, she's like, you would not see this because this
is your bedroom hair.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be like coming in a nightgown that's kind of like half buttoned. Like, it's a very like intimate, sexy thing that's happening. I don't mind that stuff because we live in a different age.
Yeah.
And it means different things. Like, so this is just communicating she's in a more natural state. She's a country girl kind of thing. That's fine with me. So I don't mind it being more sexy. This is just such an inappropriate place to be sexy. This is the point where we should be seeing them at odds with each other. Like she just said, not only am I saying no to your marriage proposal, but you are actually an absolute asshole who fucked over my sister for no good reason. Like, no. There shouldn't be any sexual tension at the end of that. It should just be tension.
I guess they just wanted to really play into that enemies to lovers kind of trope.
It's fine. It doesn't ruin the movie by any means. It's just one moment where I'm like, have some restraint. You've exercised so much restraint in the rest of the movie.
Does she also mention... Yeah, she mentions Wickham in this little scene, right?
Mr. Wickham.
Yeah. And that's kind of how we get into the next scene after they part ways.
Again, going with the theme of low points don't last very long. Immediately after, Darcy stops by and leaves a letter and basically says, here's my explanation of all this shit you're accusing me of, and it perfectly explains all his behavior, basically. And of course, you know, Lizzie, she doesn't know what to believe. She's heard a lot of different stories, a lot of conflicting information. And so when Charlotte's like, what have you done to poor Mr. Darcy? She's like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I hardly know what's going on. And so we recover from that again, and where we go to next is Lizzie then goes to stay with her aunt and uncle for a spell. All of the like side characters in this movie are so great. I love all of them, and the aunt and uncle are fabulous characters.
I agree.
We only get like 3 lines from each of them. They're
so fun. Another random thing that I read on the IMDb page is that the director liked the aunt and uncle characters so much and the actors so much that like all those scenes he made really warm and like inviting, and because he just liked them that much too.
It's great. I mean, I love, you get the feeling that this is a family, actually. Like, it feels like she's going to see her aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
And they have so many great lines. Like, all of their lines are zingers. Like, I love the aunt saying to Lizzie, careful, my love, that savors strongly of bitterness.
Yeah, what are men compared to rocks and mountains?
Or carriages that work. She, like, rips her husband. And then I love the line where Lizzie's, like, they're going to go visit Pemberley. They're going to go visit Darcy's estate. He's not supposed to be there, but these great men are never home. They're going to go visit, and she's like, I don't really want to. And they're like, why? And it's like, he's just so rich. And the uncle says, oh, you can't hold that against him. Poor man can't help it. Like, it's such a burden to be so rich.
Yeah.
They just, all great lines, and they're just complete throwaway characters. They do not matter in the long run of things, but they help to make the world feel the way it does.
Yeah.
This is a place that you want to be in. And so they go to Pemberley, just like the way you would visit a museum, basically. And they're viewing this fabulous estate, and this takes me back to when I studied the book. where my professor was talking about this is the moment in the book where she falls for Darcy. And it happens in the movie, too. Like, her opinion of him changes as she's seeing his place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of interesting things going on there, not least of which is, holy shit, this guy is loaded. So they're touring the facilities, and she wanders off, and she sees, through a cracked door, Mr. Darcy is there, and he puts his arm around a young girl. And we learn later it's a big misunderstanding. It's his sister that he dotes on so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there. We as the audience also kind of realize, man, she's really into Darcy at this point.
Yeah, she sees him and then immediately like runs away.
Yeah. And I love that she tries to run away and she runs into like a little balcony that there's no exit from. And she's just like, fuck.
And he runs out there and he's like, hey.
What's up, girl?
And she's like, oh, hi.
And she departs in tears. She's very upset, and things are on the upward trend because he went and saw the aunt and uncle and is starting to set things right and saying, "Come over tomorrow."
I was gonna say, in their like very short interaction after they run into each other, they're both just kind of awkward. But you can tell that neither of them are mad at each other or like hold any ill will. They're just kind of like, oh, what do I do now? Like,
right. And you're getting the vibe. We're getting pretty close to the end where one of the things that Lizzie says about Mr. Darcy is that we're so similar. And this is a moment where you really feel that, where it's like, yeah, the way they relate to people is very similar, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically Darcy goes to her aunt and uncle and says, come over tomorrow. And she does. And it's just, what a wonderful scene.
Yeah.
She comes over and we get to see Georgiana's playing the piano forte and just doing a beautiful job. And they come into the door and she runs over and she's just so excited to meet Lizzie and says, basically it's like, my brother's told me so much about you. And we are kind of given some insight into Darcy's head where it's like, he really is smitten.
Yeah.
There's a great line in there where Georgiana says, you should play the piano forte. My brother says you play so well. And Darcy's like, oh shit. Because we've seen Lizzie play and she doesn't play all that well.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's super, super cute. Like, we really get to see how they feel for each other at this point. And then where would we go?
And then we take a quick turn. Things go sour again.
Yep. We go to Dramaville. We find out that Mr. Wickham has eloped with one of the younger Bennett girls, Lydia. Lydia.
Oh, Lydia.
Which is a big deal. This is one of those things that the movie does help you to understand that this is a big deal, but I feel like for a modern audience, it might be hard to understand why this matters. Right. Because at the time, this would basically it would be a scandalous affair.
Yeah.
That would make it so that no one would want to marry any of the Bennett girls.
Right. It ruins your family reputation, basically.
And so you have no prospects for marrying, which means that they're going to lose their estate.
Yeah.
That's all kind of implied, and you understand it's a big deal, but I would get why a modern audience would be like, what? Why is this so bad?
Right.
But anyway, it is bad. They rush home, and we find out that the marriage has been paid for, it's all good, but we don't know who did it. And Mr. Bennett suspects that it's the aunt and uncle. The uncle basically paid for it.
And then Lydia, at dinner, opens her fat mouth and is like, oh yeah, this is Mr. Darcy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get a very uncomfortable departure of Lydia.
Oh,
where we get a little preview into the future where Wickham slaps her around.
Pulls her down. You get a nice little glimpse of that abusive relationship.
Which, is probably the case.
Yeah.
Yikes. And then the movie is just rushing to a conclusion at this point.
That was what I put, too. My last bullet point for this was, chaotic ending. Everything is happening, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, because what happens right after that? Right after that, Bingley comes back.
Yeah, so, the girls are, in town for some reason.
Right.
The mom...
And some guy in a top hat is
just bumps into them.
Rumor.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, hey, Bingley's coming back. And Jane's like, all right, whatever, I'm fine. I don't care. And then he, like, shows up at their estate. He and Darcy just show up. And you get the big flurry of, like, they're all in one room, like, just lazing about on the couch, like, eating, hanging out. And they see him coming, and they're like,
Pants
fuck!
outside.
And they all run around, like, throw everything into
The
drawers.
ribbons.
The ribbons! And then when they finally come into the door, they're all, like, sitting very primly, like...
This movie is just filled with so many great shots.
Yeah.
You can take so many still images from this movie. They're just so beautiful. And that scene is, very cute. They're all put together, so much so that Bingley is flustered and has to leave and recompose himself.
They come in and, like, don't say anything, and then leave immediately. And then you get the other nice shot of him, like, practicing his proposal with Darcy. Which another thing I read was that scene wasn't supposed to be as long as it was, but they just loved how he did it, how that actor did it, and what he was doing, that they had to make it longer for him because it was so fun.
I'm so glad they do. This is like one of the few times in the movie where they really take their time.
Yeah.
And it's like these little cute moments that make you feel really connected to these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Bingley is such a nothing in the book. Bingley is a MacGuffin. Bingley is like, really is just the rich, vacant. He is the counterpart to Jane.
Yeah.
In every way.
Yeah.
But Bingley in the movie is very cute and very funny. He has a couple really charming moments. I love when... this is much earlier in the movie when Jane is visiting Netherfield. Or no, Lizzie's visiting Netherfield because Jane is sick.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets a real zinger off on Mr. Darcy. And they cut to Bingley
He
and
just
he's
goes,
like... It's just so endearing.
Yeah.
And so he rehearses, he comes back and is like, get out of here. I got to talk to Jane. Proposes.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a very good line. Now this is very interesting, knowing that they are exes.
Yeah.
Because he delivers a very emotional response to his proposal. Which it's probably pretty weird to shoot.
I'm sure it was fine. Yeah, she gets to say her, yes, 1,000 times, yes.
It's very cute, and they're overjoyed. And then, again, rushing towards the end. Night of proposal. Who shows up at midnight? It's Lady de Burgh.
Lady de Bitch is back.
She shows up, insults everybody, and it's like, I need to talk to Lizzie. Hey, I heard a rumor. You're going to get married to my nephew, Mr. Darcy, and I don't want that. And Lizzie's like, don't know what you're talking about.
Get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah, basically it's like, get out of here. And this is all for drama purposes because, there's really no obstacle standing in the way of her and Darcy getting together.
Mm-hmm.
So they introduce this, which is fine. Doesn't bother me. But then she, leaves, rushes out. Leave me alone, everybody. Goes outside, and in the dawn, we see Darcy approaching across the glades. Now, I have a real question here. What do you think of this long shot?
It's so long. It is
Matthew
so long.
Macfayden walking to meet her.
I think he nails it, though. It's not awkward. I didn't feel uncomfortable watching it. It's just more of the edging, We're building. He finally makes it over, 10 minutes later.
Truly. Here's another question. Is Matthew Macfayden sexy in this movie?
I think we might have talked about this on our commentary.
I'm sure we did.
Yes, he is sexy in this movie, I think. Just, the character and the way he plays it, and I don't know, something about the atmosphere of the movie, he is sexy. If I saw him outside of this movie, I don't think I would think that he is sexy, no.
Definitely, what makes it is that he is, tall, dark, and mysterious, but that you learn he's warm. I think that's what makes him appealing.
Mm-hmm.
If he was the guy that we met at the beginning and didn't change that much, he would just be a tremendous douchebag.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he walks across the field and goes to her and basically proposes again. Mm-hmm. Delivers the line. A very hard line, in my opinion, where he says, I love you, and he stutters over it a few times. That's a hard line to deliver and sell it. I think he does a pretty good job. Yeah.
This is also at this part, he's like, I've come to believe that you have changed your mind about me. If that's not true, I will not bother you ever again, I promise. But if you have, then I think we should do this.
She's just like, go on.
And then we get your favorite line of the whole movie.
I have I have 3 problems with this movie. Okay, we've already covered one.
Yeah.
Which is the
almost kiss,
almost
lean
kiss,
in.
very inappropriate time. And she's like, well then, and then grabs his hand and is going to kiss it, which I'm like, I'm down for. This is like we're talking about edging. Like, this is porno.
Yeah.
Her kissing his hand. Wow. And she goes, your hands are cold. And he kind of nods. And then they hold each other. It's like, why was that line put in? What is the point of that line?
See,
do you agree? That's a bad line.
This is why I think you're critical and I'm not critical, because I don't fucking care about that. That doesn't bother me. It's like, whatever.
I think it bothers me because this is like a perfect movie to me. And so the little tiny things stand out that much more to me. Mm-hmm. The weird choices, and that was a weird choice to me. If she had just kissed his hand and then they held each other, beautiful.
Knock it out of the park.
Why does she need to say your hands are cold and then he's like, yeah. Okay, so that's 2 of my complaints. Do you want to hear complaint number 3?
I think I know what complaint number 3 is.
I know for a fact this appeared on the commentary track. It's the weird zoom in on the pig's balls. Yeah. Look, I like showing that the Bennetts are like kind of, middle class. They're not the classiest folks.
Country.
We get plenty of shots of their farm and stuff, but they're showing animals being herded through the house. That would have been enough to show me, okay, they're not that classy. And then we get a shot at Mrs. Bennet going like, what's going on? And then a zoom in on a giant pair of pigs swinging balls. As if to imply Mrs. Bennet is looking at these nuts very intently. What is the point of that shot? Who put that shot in there?
I don't know. I would love to see someone else's take on that.
That's something you're never going to see in an IMDb trivia. But I would love to know. Anyway.
You know what? There's a commentary track. Maybe if you watch the commentary version, they would talk about it.
I want to now. Anyway, those are my little qualms. Now we get to the end where Darcy is talking to Mr. Bennet and saying, I would like to marry your daughter. We don't see any of that conversation. Mm-hmm. I love the little exchange between Jane and Mrs. Bennet being like, I thought that, we all thought that. We must have been wrong, And then we get a beautiful exchange between Lizzie and Mr. Bennet where she's explaining, he's like, if you want to marry him, go for it. I mean, you'll have a lot more carriages than your sister, if that makes you happy. He's kind of dripping with sarcasm, like, I don't think that's who you are.
Yeah.
And she has to convince him, no, I'm really in love with him. And I love the cut to him when he realizes, oh, she's serious. She really is in love with this guy. And you go on this roller coaster ride with Mr. Bennet being so happy and overjoyed for your daughter, and then realizing, oh, I'm losing the person I'm closest to basically forever. Mm-hmm. And then she leaves and his hand grasping at nothing. Like, incredible performance.
He's got his little giggle, but then his eyes are kind of wet. Like, he looks very, very emotional.
Yeah. But it's a comedy, so it ends with, if anyone else is wanting to propose to one of my daughters, send them in. I'm quite at my leisure. And then he laughs to himself. Mm-hmm. And then we get, a final scene where we get our porno shot of Mr. Darcy and Lizzie.
So perfect.
Yeah, Mrs. Darcy. Great addition to the end of the movie. Give us a little bit of satisfaction.
Yeah, give us a smooch. Come on. Give us a smooch.
Yep. Great movie. Perfect movie.
Almost
in spite
perfect.
of the 3 small things I said. This is as close as it gets, in my opinion, to a perfect movie.
Wow, okay.
So I guess that's kind of spoilers for our final review. Mm-hmm. How would you grade this movie?
I said it's 2 hours and 9 minutes of burning sexual tension. 10 out of 10 pig's balls. That's
I'm glad the pig's balls made it to your review. I said, on a scale of rightfully owned glances, I would give it a 0 out of 10. On a scale of stolen glances, 10 out of 10. S+++. And as far as a recommendation goes, if I had a friend who didn't really watch romantic comedies, but I thought might like them, this is the movie I would show to them to hopefully sell it to them. There are definitely people in this world who are just going to dislike romantic comedies and period pieces. That's fine. This movie is not for them. But if there's even a chance that someone you know could like this kind of thing, have them watch this movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah, I would... Obviously, anybody who loves period pieces, sees this movie or has seen this movie. But I'd recommend it to anyone who likes sexual tension, stolen glances, enemies to lovers, or also anyone who just enjoys like visually beautiful movies, because I think this is a visually beautiful movie.
If you're one of the people who, in watching The Office, really gets off on the Jim-Pam relationship, watch this movie.
Yeah.
So that's basically, if you took that and made a whole movie of that, that's this.
There you go.
I should rewrite my tagline. That's even better, actually.
The 19th century Jim and Pam. Also, I just think this is a perfect, late Sunday afternoon, laying on the couch, haven't done anything all day, and you don't want to do anything all afternoon kind of movie. And also, I recommend this movie to people who have recently been out of a relationship and just kind of want to sit in sadness and also feel a little bit of love. Sometimes you're in that mood where you're I just want to wallow in sadness and maybe cry a little and think about romance. I think this is a good movie for that.
Yeah, and I would say too, because I remember one of my memories with this movie, we did not talk about this, I don't think, in the commentary track. This is a movie I remember wandering by your bedroom, and you would have your TV on to fall asleep to, because you always like to have something on. And I would just hear the menu track because you had fallen asleep to the movie, and it's just playing this beautiful music. And I think one of the great things about this movie, it's kind of like a fantasy world. It's a world that can't exist, and it has its own rules. And it just feels comfortable and nice to be in this world, I think. Which is what is nice. It's why I put it on when I'm moving into a new place. It makes me feel comfortable and good.
Yeah.
Great movie. And a great first episode of watching movies. I guess we should shout out where you can find us. You can find me on Twitter at Wolfmere.
You know what? I'm not sure what my Twitter is. I think my Instagram is Tonka Truck.
You can retake this after you find it.
It's Tonka Truck Web. WEBB. Tonka Truck Web. You can follow me on Instagram since I like to review movies on my stories.
Very good. And I think we're going to use the hashtag, if you want to tag us, hashtag April Kenny Movies.
All right.
So there you go.
Sounds great.
And we have not come up with an exit tagline, so I'm going to let April improvise that on the spot. Take us away, April.
Oh, no. Come back and watch the movies with us.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Does the thought of leading a group through the creative landscapes of your imagination terrify you? Do you worry about being asked questions you don't know the answers to? Have you wanted to try being a dungeon or game master, but your social anxiety has been holding you back? Hi, I'm Amber, and I used to nearly vomit at the idea of running a tabletop RPG. How'd I get over that anxiety? I haven't. Surprise! I'm still an anxious mess, and you can listen to all of it on Shapeshift, where I've recorded 80% of every game I've ever ran. Over the last 4 years, I've run a ton of indie one-shots like Casketland, a weird Western horror game, to my first ever campaign using Ryutama, a Studio Ghibli-like exploration-focused game. Follow me through my journey learning how to GM and to live with my anxiety. It doesn't go away completely, but it does get easier to manage. Go to geekspective.com to find out more information or find Shapeshift on wherever you listen to your podcasts.